On one occasion in a neighborhood in New York City, a woman by the name of Kitty Genovese was walking along the sidewalk just about to reach her apartment when she was approached by some muggers. They not only stole her purse and everything else, they stabbed her several times until she died. When the police investigated, they discovered that many people in the apartment building heard her scream and asked for help, and no one came. And they began to wonder why people didn't go help. So they went to interview them, and some people said, well, I didn't want to get involved. And other people said, well, it's not my business. Or another person said, I was afraid. But that actually launched a study into something known as moral development, so that people could begin to understand how or why the idea of morality developed. Lawrence Kohlberg was the most famous in mid-20th century. He was the most famous researcher, and he built a hierarchy of moral thought, which was true to some extent, but was never later substantiated by research. So in recent years, people involving social interaction who studied how people relate to each other have risen to the top of the scientific world where moral development is concerned. And they are demonstrating that moral development is a function of social interaction. Why should that interest you? Because you interact with your children. And because of that interaction, you can teach them to develop a strong sense of morality or moral character. So this episode is devoted a little bit to how that happens and what you can do about it. So imagine that human beings as individuals associate with other human beings. And after a while, when we have individuals and groups of people, we have to come up with how are we going to get along? What kind of conditions should we create? So they create rule conditions, and these rule conditions are interesting because they are designed to make sure that individual rights can coexist with what helps or harms people, which is what our Constitution and our democratic laws are supposed to protect. In fact, if you studied Congress and you studied our Constitution, it's all about what helps or harms people. So eventually a vocabulary emerged that had to do with words that allowed people individual rights and didn't hurt other people. So I could pursue buying property, and I could do it in a certain way without injuring everybody, and that would be called integrity or honesty or something else. So moral development actually is about how to relate as an individual to other people and pursue your own aims, which people want to do. All of us want to do that without harming anyone else. And its development actually includes the idea that children need to learn about themselves and learn about other people, and in terms of what helps or harms people. Where does empathy or compassion come from? Those are moral concepts which allow me to promote my own sense of well-being and at the same time care for you. And so children need to learn to understand people in terms of what helps or harms. So I asked my kids one day, have you helped anyone at school? And they gave me a blank stare, like I was speaking a foreign language. And gradually, after 2 or 3 days of that, one of my sons said, I did. I wanted to know what that was. And he saw some older kids bully a younger boy and went over and stopped them because he was one of the bigger boys. And then he played with this boy during recess. That is a moral behavior. Now, along the way then, children need to learn to control language and their emotions, called self-regulation, so that they can manage their emotions in order to make decisions that help and do not harm people. So, for example, if you're walking down the street and you see a house burning and people in the house yelling for help, right at that very moment you have to make a decision. Should I run in there and risk my own life to help those people or not? Well, you regulate your emotions. If you're terrified, you run away. If you regulate your emotions and produce confidence, then you go in and help out. Now, along the way, we have something called conscience formation, where children begin to take all of these social words about themselves and other people and put them in an internal world. So it's like a library in the brain. And this conscience formation has to do with a sense of what's right or helps people and what's wrong and harms people. And then they develop feelings about it. And the way they do is that they do what's wrong. They find out from people that it was wrong and it hurts people, and they feel sad and guilty and so on. Or then they'll help people and they feel excited and happy and contented because they do, and that's the conscience. Then along the way, if you want to help your children, then teach them a variety of moral concepts. Teach them the actual moral words and show how they're displayed by people. So what's integrity? What's responsibility? What's dependability? What's honesty? What's compassion? What's loyalty? Is loyalty a concept that is moral? Yes. What's procrastination? Is procrastination a moral concept? It is, because it hurts the people who do it and possibly injure people that they are not being responsible to. Then along the way, you can help your children associate certain forms of behavior and certain emotions, like I'm happy to help, I'm sad that I was mean to somebody, I was excited and contented, to do something useful, whereas if I did nothing, I'd be unhappy and miserable. So these emotions eventually become linked and become part of what is known as moral character. Now, a person with a strong moral character is like this. They are willing to do what they know or believe to be important, whether other people do or not. So they will resist two kinds of pressure from their peers. People want you to do something, the answer that's wrong or harms people, no. And people don't want to do something, and you'll say, yes, I'm going to, because it's right or helps people. Now, these are learned over time by children, that it helps them to resolve dilemmas, really tough situations where there's no neutral ground. And so whatever you do, including nothing, can help or harm somebody. So children have to find a way to say, wow, what am I going to do here? So it's like a girl who goes to a ninth grade party, finds out all the girls have formed a club, her closest friend is not included. When she gets home and tells her mother excitedly that they're all going to buy a new sweater and wear it to school on Thursdays, she'll say, well, where is your friend Gail? Oh, yes, Gail. Well, she's not going to be a part of this, mother. And so the mother said, well, she's your best friend. Don't you think you ought to be loyal to her? Now we have a dilemma. Ellen is faced with, I want to belong to that group of popular girls, but I have my friend, and so on. She has to decide. Now, the decision point most of the time is on what will help people and what will help you feel the most positive thing about helping people. We need greater emphasis in our schools and in our governments and in our churches about the teaching and training of moral behavior. We have too little of it in too many places where people are having difficulty and they're not being led well by their leaders and they're not being treated well by their neighbors. And when we are, then what's in place are these forms of moral behavior. Teach it to your children. Teach them the moral words. Teach them to look at people and understand them, and teach them to be good at compassion and empathy.